You're not an only child. Who else is in the family?
I have a younger 8-year-old brother and an older 13-year-old sister.
How you get along with them?
Me and my brother.
Is Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vegno. And that's what being in that ER room. Yeah. And have to come front and center. Yep, you can't make it up, and I appreciate that. You can't make it up. In regards to enforcement, I will continue to do what we've done in the past relative to it. We are planning for August the 23rd for those enforcement efforts to kickstart. We are right now working through our enforcement protocols, much aligned like they were previously.
You've been watching Mayor LaToya Cantrell announce some new regulations about COVID-19 in the city of New Orleans. She stopped short of another shutdown. She stopped short of making capacity restrictions at restaurants and bars, but she did say that those restaurants, bars, and other venues are going to require a proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test within 72 hours before you can enter some of the city's best-known venues, including the Superdome and our restaurants.
Yeah, and she said, you know, we have no choice. The situation is dire. That was a direct quote. Then we heard from Dr. Jennifer Avegno, the city's health director, who really put it in perspective, saying that Louisiana as a state leads the world in terms of new cases right now. We're going to have much more coming up on our Eyewitness News at 5. We do hope you will stick around with us. It'll begin just momentarily.
Eyewitness News begins with breaking news.
Well, you have been watching it live here on Channel 4. Mayor LaToya Cantrell with a big announcement on new COVID restrictions.
Yeah, so let's take a look at those right now. We're going to spell them out for you. The mayor announced proof of vaccination or a recent negative COVID test will be required for eating at restaurants, drinking at bars, or even working out at gyms and attending events at stadiums, including the Superdome. That requirement is going to go into effect next Monday. It's all part of the effort to slow the spread of the Delta variant of COVID, and the mayor listed all of the venues involved, and there are a lot of them.
Bars, restaurants, breweries throughout our parish, gyms, fitness centers throughout our parish, sports complexes and stadiums. This includes the Superdome, concerts, centers, music halls, event spaces, and adult performing or performance venues, casinos and racetracks also included in this. We are not in capacity.
But obviously, many businesses will be impacted by this new vaccine requirement policy.
Yeah, and while it is a burden for businesses, I would think that it is good at least that they don't have new capacity restrictions or a shutdown. And Devin Bartolotta is joining us live now with more reaction from the business community to all of that. Devin?
Well, Karen and Katie, some business owners tell me they were already thinking of ways that they could implement a vaccination rule, but now they do have the backing of the city. It will mean figuring out some logistical issues for establishments here in New Orleans. Some of them will have to add staff at the door to check vaccine cards. Hospitality workers, though, tell us this makes them feel as though the city has their health in mind. We talked with Scott Craig, who owns Katie's Mid-City and Francesca in Lakeview. He says he is in support of this rule, but is frustrated it even has to happen.
At this point, I find it kind of selfish not to be vaccinated. I'm a little irritated about the whole thing. Now we've lost Jazz Fest, we've lost French Quarter Fest, we've lost, Voodoo Fest. We're losing a lot of money that was coming into the city that affects restaurants and bars. It affects mine.
Now remember, French Quarter Fest is still on for this year at this time. This rule, as you mentioned, will still impact the Superdome. We reached out to ASM Global for comment. We will be following this story throughout the afternoon, and we will have more coming up. For now, reporting live in New Orleans, Devin Bartolotta, Eyewitness News.
All right, Devin, much more to come, and we'll hear again more about the announcement on vaccine requirements in just a few minutes. We're going to have a live report from City Hall, and we also have a story on the FDA taking a closer look at approving a third dose of COVID vaccines for people who are the most vulnerable. That's all coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, now we're going to shift gears and get an update on Fred, still a tropical depression, but it is expected to strengthen as it approaches South Florida on Saturday. It is expected to remain a depression through today at least.
Yeah, the storm made landfall over the Dominican Republic yesterday. We saw some crazy waves on the shores there. Let's take a look at some of the flooding that's been caused by that. Heavy rain causing water to pile up in the streets there. Also, strong winds knocked down trees and power lines throughout the area.
All right, so what can we expect Fred to do next? Let's go straight to your local weather expert, Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin with more. Chris.
Guys, probably not going to see much happening with Fred as it is still a fairly unorganized system. Now, in the last several hours, you saw what was very much an exposed center beginning to see some thunderstorm development around it. So it is trying to get better organized, but it's going to have a tough time to do so. Wind shear, dry